I understood what I should do. I could explain it clearly. But my behavior didn't change. I used to believe that understanding something was enough, that if I could explain an idea clearly, if I truly got it, change would naturally follow. That belief felt reasonable. After all, understanding feels powerful. It feels like progress. But over time, I started noticing something uncomfortable. I understood a lot, and very little actually changed. I knew what I should do. I could explain why certain habits mattered. I could even give advice to others, yet my own behavior stayed mostly the same, and I don't think that's a personal failure. I think it's a misunderstanding of how change actually works. We often confuse understanding with transformation. They feel similar, but they are not the same thing. Understanding happens in the mind, change happens in behavior, and those two don't automatically connect. In fact, the more we consume explanations, the easier it becomes to mistake clarity for action. We read, we watch, and each time our brain rewards us with a sense of insight. That reward feels good, it feels productive. But insight alone doesn't require commitment. You don't have to risk anything to understand an idea. You don't have to give anything up. You don't have to be uncomfortable. You just have to pay attention, and that's why understanding is easy to accumulate and easy to stop at. I've noticed that the more clearly something is explained, the more tempting it becomes to stay at the level of explanation. You feel informed, you feel aware, you feel like you're on the right track. But awareness does move your life forward. Action does, and action asks for something. Understanding doesn't. It asks for effort, it asks for repetition, it asks for discomfort. Understanding says, now you know. Action says, now you have to show up. That gap between knowing and doing is where most change quietly dies. Not because people don't care, not because they're lazy, but because understanding feels like progress. And progress feels satisfying enough to stop. We rarely talk about this part. We celebrate clarity. We share insights. We trade explanations. But we don't talk much about how little those things move us. On their own, think about how often you've said, I know this already. That sentence sounds confident, but it often hides stagnation, because if knowing were enough, we'd all be very different people. By now, I've also noticed something else. The easier it becomes to understand complex ideas, the more pressure disappears to act on them. When information was harder to access, understanding felt valuable. Now that explanations are everywhere, understanding feels endless. There's always another angle, another breakdown, another perspective. So action keeps getting postponed, not consciously, quietly. I will start when I understand this a little better. I will change once I'm clearer. I just need one more insight, and somehow that moment never arrives. This isn't about rejecting learning. Learning matters. Understanding creates direction. It helps us avoid obvious mistakes. It gives us language for what we're experiencing. But understanding is a starting point, not a finish line. The problem begins when we treat it like completion, when we reward ourselves for clarity instead of for consistency, when we feel accomplished for knowing instead of for doing. I've had to remind myself of this repeatedly, not in a harsh way, just honestly. Understanding doesn't ask much of me. Action does. Understanding is safe. Action is uncertain. Understanding keeps options open. Action closes some doors, and that's why it's easier to stay informed than to actually change. Real change rarely feels like insight. It feels awkward. It feels repetitive. It feels unremarkable. Most of the time, it doesn't feel like growth at all. It just feels like showing up again without any new realization to reward you. That's why understanding alone is so seductive. It gives you the feeling of movement without requiring movement. And in a world overflowing with explanations, that feeling is easy to mistake for progress. So maybe the question isn't do I understand this? Maybe it's what am I willing to repeat, even when it doesn't feel insightful anymore. Because understanding may open the door, but action is the only thing that actually walks through it. So I'm curious, is there something you understand very clearly but haven't T acted on yet? And if so, what's really stopping you from starting?